Tell me a horror story about your backyard. My entire life has been a horror story since moving into my new house last year. The day we moved in, it was like every single neighbor was watching us. It was one of those situations where they were just staring at you and then they look away when you look at them. I even caught one taking photos of our moving truck. Some of them were nice, but it felt more like they were being nice so they could get inside and watch us better. There were maybe 5 or 6 houses that had their curtains drawn and no lights on, while all the others were lit up. And here's the kicker. I grew up in a small town where everyone minds their own business. They don't want to know what you're doing, how you live, etc. This was just weird. I remember thinking this is going to be a long year. My backyard is massive, and it's completely fenced in with a wrought iron fence. The previous owners left behind a large trampoline, a pool table, and a hot tub. Those were fine, no big deal, but they also left a lot of statues and ornaments. Now, I didn't think anything of it at first until I realized how creepy they were. There were gnomes, ceramic frogs, these odd little houses and trees made from some kind of rock. A ceramic family of squirrels, deer, owls, garden angels, bird baths, and bird feast tables, fake animals. It was like walking into a nightmare. The next morning after we'd moved in, I went out to take the trash out, and I noticed something strange. All of the ornaments and statues were lined up perfectly straight facing the house. That wasn't how they were the evening before. I checked the security footage, and sure enough, they weren't there the night before. And we were the only people who had a key to the gates. I talked to my wife about it, and she suggested that we take most of it to the dump, so we did. But before we could finish, a black SUV pulled up. Out stepped a well-dressed middle-aged couple, introduced themselves as the neighbors, and asked if we were the new owners of the house. When I said yes, they told us that we shouldn't throw out those decorations because they belonged to the previous owner, a Mrs. Gable. She had passed away and they were her next of kin. We explained that we found them in the backyard and we were going to get rid of them. The woman's face fell. She shook her head and said, "Oh, no, 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 no." And then she started screaming at us, demanding that we return them immediately. Then she spotted the empty garbage bins and lost it, saying that we should have brought them to her house instead. She told us to bring the bins back with whatever was left in them and then stormed off. My wife and I looked at each other in shock. I thought, what a crazy lady. I hope she doesn't come snooping around our property looking for her knickknacks. Little did I know. Later that day, we decided to get rid of what was left. We took everything except for a few pieces to the dump. And while we were gone, same black SUV pulled up outside and the man from before got out and walked around the yard taking pictures. My wife spotted him and yelled at him to leave our property. He ignored her and continued taking pictures. So she snapped a picture of him with her phone and sent it to him. He then went back to his car and drove off. Later that week, we received a box in the mail with 2 rolls of film in it. We took them to the drugstore to develop them, and they were of our yard. And sure enough, he was in all of them. One of the pictures was of the gate with the timestamp showing that he was there before we were. Another was of our house and the street, with what appeared to be markings drawn over it, almost like a target. Other photos included the area around the pool table and the hot tub. It was like he was trying to see where everything was located. Meanwhile, I kept having nightmares of someone breaking into our home while we were asleep and vandalizing it. I would wake up in a panic, drenched in sweat. My wife suggested that I put up a motion sensor light outside. I did, but it gave me an eerie feeling knowing that we were being watched constantly. If you're ever going to install a motion sensor, make sure that it has a bright light bulb. Otherwise, it won't do much to ward off intruders. One evening, while sitting in bed, we heard loud banging on our front door. We both froze. I slowly got up and went to investigate. Whoever it was had already stopped. I looked through the peephole and saw nothing. I opened the door slightly and called out, "Hello?" No response. I tried the door to make sure it was locked. It was the whole event left me shaken. My wife and I went to a friend S' house for dinner the following night to try and take our minds off of things. At about 9 p.m., my phone rang. It was our neighbor checking to see if we needed any help with our pool. What? It was clear that he was trying to be friendly, but it was getting weird. But we politely declined his offer and hung up. When we got home, we turned on all the lights. As we were unpacking, we noticed that the motion sensor light outside flickered, suggesting that someone had walked past it. I ran to the window and looked out. Nothing. We decided to check the cameras. Sure enough, we caught someone walking across our lawn. It was the neighbor, who was within 5 feet of our bedroom window. We confronted him about it the next day, to which he replied, "I was just trying to see what kind of plants you have. I love gardening." His wife stood by silently, didn't buy it, but what could I do? Call the police for trespassing? That would be ridiculous. A few weeks later, at around 2 a.m., my daughter knocked on my door and told me that she could unsleep because she kept hearing voices coming from the backyard. She wanted to sleep in my room for the night. I assured her that everything was fine and went back to sleep. But then I started hearing voices too. I got up and peeked out the window. Everything was dark, except for the glowing eyes of the owls and garden statues. It was definitely creepy. The next morning, my son told me that he heard strange noises too. He refused to go out into the backyard alone. I checked the cameras and saw nothing. My wife and I decided to tear out most of the statues and plants. I wanted to remove the rest, but my wife said that we should leave some so that it would unlook like a demolition site. She said that we should focus on building good memories in the backyard with the kids instead of focusing on the bad. I agreed, but I couldn't shake this feeling that we were being watched. Last summer, my daughter's birthday party was ruined when it started pouring rain right as we were about to blow up the castle. We ended up canceling the party and refunding all the guests. My wife cried because she spent a fortune on decorations and food. I tried to comfort her, but I was scared that something bad was going to happen. Something told me to look at the cameras. I did, and sure enough, the faces of the trespassers were visible. My heart sank. It was our neighbors. They stood over our ruined party smiling. I called the police and pressed charges. I guess they felt that they finally had the green light to destroy our property. And they must have done this several times before. I couldn't believe that they would stoop so low. To this day, I can't understand why they did this. After we had the talk with the police, my wife and I started noticing that certain items were missing. They weren't expensive or valuable, just random things like garden hoses, extension cords, cleaning supplies, and tools. Then the vandalism began. Every time we turned around, our yard decorations and furniture had paint thrown on them. Our kids' toys were broken, and the windows and windshield of our cars were smashed. One day we came home to find the words "Get Out" spray painted on our garage door. At this point, we'd had enough. We called the police and pressed charges. It's still an ongoing investigation, and we haven't had any problems since. I keep the curtains closed now and don't spend much time in the backyard. I have zero interest in finding out what else might be lurking in there.